Recently, of course, South Africa has been doing super well at Miss Universe. I mean, during the IMG era alone, we had 2 winners, but South Africa has actually competed on and off at Miss Universe since the very first Miss Universe competition in 1952. In this video, we will be looking at South Africa's history at Miss Universe, the women who have represented South Africa, the placements, as well as the organizations who have held the Miss Universe license. Because surprisingly, it's not always been the Miss South Africa organization sending women to Miss Universe. There have been a couple different ones. Let's get into this. The very first woman to represent South Africa at Miss Universe was Catherine Higgins in 1952. She was Miss Golden Jubilee, who was the organization sending women to Miss Universe in those early days, and she managed to get a top 10 placement at the very first Miss Universe competition. In 1953, it was Ingrid Rita Mills who managed to get a top 16 placement. For some reason, from 1954 to 1959, South Africa didn't compete at Miss Universe at all. But in 1960, South Africa was back through the Miss Hibiscus Queen pageant. And this was now the new organization sending women to Miss Universe. In 1960, Nikki Kairas actually represented South Africa at Miss Universe and got South Africa's very first runner-up placement when she placed as the 3rd runner-up. In 1961 and 1962, unfortunately through Marina Christelis and Lynette Gamble, South Africa did not place at Miss Universe at all. But in 1963, Ellen Liebenberg got a top 15 placement for South Africa, which was unfortunately followed by Gail Robinson's unplacement in 1964. In 1965, Veronica Prigg got a top 15 placement for South Africa at Miss Universe. Unfortunately, since 1965, in 1966, 1967 and 1968, Lynn Carroll de Jager, Wendy Bellenden and Monica Farrell got unplaced at Miss Universe, bringing an end to the Miss Hibiscus Queen stint at Miss Universe. And that last one, actually, Monica Farrell, who represented South Africa at Miss Universe 1969, did cause some controversy because she was wearing what at the time was apparently a very revealing dress. And I must concur somewhat, you know, nowadays it's not that controversial to be wearing a dress like this, showing this amount of skin on stage, but like that low back was very, very low, and it was like 1 centimeter from her butt crack. It wasn't bad. It was actually, it's very great, but this did cause a lot of controversy. It was even written about in the paper, and Monica was absolutely mortified, even asking what her mother would think. It's all incredibly exciting. Unfortunately, since then, Monica has passed away, but she has left a lasting impression, I think, on myself. You know, it takes a very confident woman to wear such a revealing dress in 1969 on stage at Miss Universe. Following Monica's reign as Miss Hibiscus Queen, unfortunately, since 1969 up until 1974, South Africa did not compete at Miss Universe until the Miss RSA, or Republic of South Africa pageant, was established in 1974 by the South African newspaper The Rapport, who also was very much affiliated with Miss South Africa for a long time. Miss RSA and Miss South Africa, I feel like, were sort of, you know, very equal in stature. Of course, Miss South Africa at that time was only for Miss World. They only send women to Miss World. They were established in 1956 to send women to Miss World. So the Miss World license in South Africa always sat with Miss South Africa, whereas the Miss Universe license jumped around a lot from organization to organization. And since 1974, it was in the hands of the Miss Republic of South Africa organization. And by the way, the Miss RSA pageant was open to all women in South Africa, women of color included, since the very beginning. In 1975, Gail Anthony represented South Africa at Miss Universe, but unfortunately went unplaced. Same with Cynthia Claassen and Glynis Vester in 1976 and 1977, respectively. In 1978, of course, South Africa managed to get their very first win at Miss Universe through the gorgeous Margaret Gardner, who is still an incredibly beautiful woman. I have no clue how she has managed to keep her figure for all of these years. Incredible. In 1979, actually, something very interesting happened at Miss Universe. You know, during the 70s and 80s, there started to be a global sort of interest in South Africa because of the apartheid regime, which was active in South Africa, and a lot of people all over the world wanted this to end and actually put a lot of pressure on companies, sports organizations to sort of boycott South Africa. And the Miss Universe organization were trying to figure out a way to include South Africa, but, you know, still show that they were sort of against apartheid. And the Miss Republic of South Africa organization, likewise, were still trying to compete at Miss Universe, but in the same way trying to show that they were very inclusive of women of color, which is interesting to me because instead of just crowning someone of color, it ended up being very strange at Miss Universe with 3 women from South Africa competing at Miss Universe. If you are familiar with the concept of Bantustans or homelands in South Africa, during the apartheid regime, South Africa was sort of split during racial lines, and only people from certain races or certain sort of heritages could live in certain places. And 2 of these Bantustans, although there were many, remember at this time South Africa was also in charge of Namibia, so Namibia was also sort of split around Bantustans and those sort of ethnic lines, but there were many Bantustans and homelands, shall I say. But at Miss Universe, 2 of these Bantustans competed individually, and these 2 were Bophuthatswana as well as Transkei, and then there was a main girl representing the rest of South Africa. So essentially there were 3 women from South Africa representing Miss Universe at once, and that's absolutely insane to me. So in 1979, Veronica Wilson was the official Miss Republic of South Africa, and she managed to place in the top 5. And in that same year, of course, the Miss Transkei representative and the Miss Bophuthatswana representative. Remember, these aren't countries, these are Bantustans that were part of South Africa and still very much under South African rule, under South African law, and were not recognized as, you know, individual countries by international law, but for some reason Miss Universe allowed them to compete under different country names, you know, as different countries, but these women are all South African. So as Miss Transkei 1979, we had Lindiwe Bam, who unfortunately went unplaced, and as Miss Bophuthatswana 1979, we had Alina Muketse, who unfortunately went unplaced as well. In 1980, no South Africans were allowed at Miss Universe. Jenny Kay was the official Miss Republic of South Africa 1980, and if anyone was supposed to be going to Miss Universe, it was Jenny Kay. But the South Korean government, which was the host of Miss Universe for that year, would have none of it. They did not condone apartheid at all, and they refused to give South Africa a visa to come and compete at Miss Universe. And looking back, I can sort of, you know, sympathize with the South African contestants, especially Jenny Kay. You know, she was probably devastated, but, you know, looking back, I feel like this sort of non-tolerance towards apartheid by other countries at the end of the day is the reason why apartheid was brought to an end, because the South African government were basically forced into ending this in order to regain international acceptance and, you know, slacken the boycotts and basically be included in international economy and trading once again. Unfortunately, Bophuthatswana never did return to Miss Universe, but in 1981, the Transkei as well as South Africa as a whole through Miss RSA were represented at Miss Universe. So in 1981, the crowned Miss Republic of South Africa was Daniela De Paulo, who went unplaced, And the Miss Transkei from that year was Kedibone Tembisa Letlaka, who unfortunately went unplaced as well. From 1982 to 1984, the Miss South Africa organization actually took over the license for Miss Universe for a bit. This was until 1984, of course, when South Africa was banned, but we'll get to that later. So under the Miss South Africa organization in 1982, Odette Octavia Scrooby reached the top 12 at Miss Universe. This was a bit controversial because I saw a lot of people, and I still get a lot of people messaging me about this to this day, that Odette's omission from going further in the competition than top 12 was very shocking. Very shocking. She apparently did very well up to a point, and then she was just excluded. And you know what? With all of the controversy around South Africa going on around that time, I definitely feel like that controversy surrounding South Africa might have had something to do with that. One of the judges was just not into it, and you know, it could have been anything, but I definitely feel like, if anything, because nobody really knows why Odette was excluded later on, I definitely feel like it had something to do with the international controversy surrounding South Africa and apartheid around that time, that South Africa was excluded and not necessarily went as far as people thought she deserved to go. In that same year of 1982, Miss Transkei was Noxolisi Mdi, who unfortunately went unplaced as well. In 1983, Leanne Beverly Hosking was Miss South Africa. She went unplaced in 1983 as well. Nomkhusi Kokelelo was unplaced as well. She was the Miss Transkei of that year. Guys, it can get quite confusing going through all of these women, having South Africa having like 2 contestants at each of the Miss Universe editions in the early 1980s. Absolutely crazy. In 1984, there was no Miss Bophuthatswana or Miss Transkei at Miss Universe. It was just Miss South Africa, Letitia Tisha Snyman, and she actually, very surprisingly, at Miss Universe 1984 managed to get a placement of first runner-up before South Africa was banned from Miss Universe for like 10 years. So after Letitia's first runner-up placement, South Africa was banned from Miss Universe from 1985 to 1994. Of course, 1994 being the year that South Africa officially ended apartheid. So there were 9 years that South Africa was not allowed at Miss Universe at all. Similarly, during those years, South Africa wasn't allowed at many international events. It wasn't just Miss Universe, it wasn't just Miss World. South Africa was banned from most international sporting events, you know, entertainment-based things like pageantry. There was a hard boycott against South Africa during this time, so it's nothing new for South Africa to experience some stagnation during the 80s and early 90s of their history. In 1995, a new organization called the Miss Universe South Africa organization was behind sending South Africa's official first black South African representative to Miss Universe, Augustine Masilela, who managed to get a top 10 placement. And although Augustine is, you know, the first official chosen representative for South Africa at Miss Universe, I feel like we mustn't forget about Lindiwe Bam, as well as Alina Muketse, who were, you know, South African women representing the Transkei as well as Bophuthatswana at Miss Universe 1979. These were women representing South Africa, even though they didn't wear South Africa across their chest. Unfortunately, Augustine's top 10 placement was an outlier situation, as in 1996 and 1997, Carol Becker and Mbale Gasa were unfortunately unplaced at Miss Universe. In 1998, of course, the Miss South Africa organization took over the Miss Universe license in South Africa for good, and they've held the license ever since 1998, so it's been around 25 years now. Absolutely incredible. And the Miss South Africa organization has done incredible things with the Miss Universe license. In 1998, of course, the beautiful Karishni Naiker represented South Africa at Miss Universe, where she placed in the top 10. In 1999, we had Sonia Rasiti, who placed in the top 5. In the year 2000, we had Heather Joy Hamilton, who placed in the top 10. Unfortunately, in 2001, the gorgeous Joanne Strauss went unplaced at Miss Universe, but in 2002, Vanessa Carrera got a third runner-up placement, while Cindy Nell got a second runner-up placement in 2003. In 2004, Joan Ramagoshi unfortunately went unplaced, but in 2005, Claudia Henkel reached the top 15. In 2006 and 2007, unfortunately, South Africa went unplaced with Nokutula Sithole and Megan Coleman representing South Africa. But in 2008, South Africa was back in the top 15 through Tanzi Gutsia. In 2009, of course, in the top 10 through Tatum Keshwar. And in 2010, in the top 10 as well through the beautiful Nicole Flint. In 2011, when represented by Bokang Motyane, South Africa unfortunately went unplaced. But in 2012, when represented by Melinda Bum, South Africa reached the top 10. A lot of people absolutely loved Melinda and still talk to this day about the fact that Melinda deserved better. But anyway, in 2013 and 2014, unfortunately, South Africa went unplaced with Marilyn Ramos and Zibuzake Zokufa representing us. I actually made a whole video about Marilyn Ramos, who was Miss South Africa 2013, and why she is the most hated Miss South Africa of all time. In 2015, South Africa was back in the top 15 through Refilwe Mtemunye, and in 2016, Ntando Yenkosi Kunene unfortunately went unplaced. In 2017, of course, we all know South Africa won its second Miss Universe title through Demi Lee Nalpeters. The last, of course, was in 1978 through Margaret Garner, who was Miss Republic of South Africa back in the day. In 2018, of course, we all know that the gorgeous Tamarin Green got the first runner-up placement. In 2019, of course, we had the beautiful Zozi Binitunzi win South Africa's third Miss Universe crown. In 2020, when represented by Natasha Hubert, unfortunately, South Africa went unplaced. But in 2021, Lalela Mswane got South Africa a second runner-up placement at Miss Universe. This year, of course, we have the gorgeous Ndave Nokere representing us. I wonder how she will do. I definitely think that South Africa will continue a nice placement streak at Miss Universe, or at least I hope so. Overall, South Africa has competed at 49 editions of Miss Universe. Out of those 49 editions that South Africa has competed in, they've only had 24 non-placements, which means that South Africa has a 51% placement streak at Miss Universe. Let me know what you guys think about South Africa's history at Miss Universe. It definitely gets a bit convoluted when it comes to the early days as well as the 80s. You know, all of those different organizations taking over the license and then giving away the license and then not competing for X amount of years and then coming back and then being banned and then sending 3 women. Absolutely insane, but luckily the Miss South Africa organization has brought some stability to South Africa's participation at Miss Universe, and you know, the numbers don't lie. South Africa has thrived the most at Miss Universe under the Miss South Africa organization. Even before the IMG era, South Africa did manage to place pretty consistently at Miss Universe since getting the license in 1998, so they've definitely done a good job at that. Let me know what you guys think. I would love to know you guys' thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.